of Stream Squad. We have a full house here today.
We have a very special show. I can cut to this right now because I'm covering up from my angle. Other than Nick and Angela, we have, boom, Ernesto!
Hello.
Who does a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. I think he's going to help us answer a couple really good user questions we have later. But yeah. How was everybody? We had a long weekend, didn't we? Long couple days.
We
Right.
literally
Yeah.
locked everyone in a room for 3 days. We did eat, so that was good.
We
we
had a
had
lot
food.
of souffles.
A lot of
souffles.
We still have some. Yeah.
If
Anyone want one?
anyone's in Louisville, come on by. Yeah, what was your favorite place we went to this weekend?
Ooh, I'm liking Lupo.
Lupo?
It's
The
good
one I
pizza.
didn't get to go to, darn.
Yeah, Lupo was good. I enjoyed Lupo also.
That's a local pizza place here.
Mhm.
I was shipped in from Italy, so
Wow.
Eternal Flame. The coals are always on.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this.
Yeah,
You
let's
ready?
get right into it. Start out with that good old industry news. You want to go ahead and cue that up for us, Angela?
Sure. So, as you guys know, we love Facebook. It seems like Facebook is always doing something new every week on Stream Squad, and today's no different. As of about 4 hours ago, Facebook has announced that they're rolling out screen sharing for Facebook Live videos on computers. So right now, it's not going to be for mobile. You've got to be on a Mac or a PC. But there is a new button that's appearing when you select Go Live from your main timeline that says Share Screen, and you're able to bring in, video games, pictures, anything like that to show to your audience while you're live. Now, this is being rolled out throughout the day since it's a new announcement, so some people have it, some people don't. Unfortunately, none of us here have gotten it on our profiles yet, so we'll play around with it and let you guys know how it works, but Facebook never stops thinking.
Well, and it's built into the Chrome browser, so you have to install the extension to be able to share that. Switcher Studio does have a screen sharing app for Mac and PC, and with that we also offer multi-view effects, so you can use that to do a picture-in-picture, show yourself and the screen at the same time. We'll be interested to see how the Facebook functionality works. I know Joel Com and some others are doing some quick demos on it, and there's some promise, but there's also some problems. But if you haven't used screen sharing yet, you can go to your online Switcher Studio account and download SwitcherCast for Mac or Windows.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have any questions, give us a shout at support@switcherstudio.com.
Yeah, for real. And the other one, I know, Nick, you want to give us a little recap of, you've been all over the place the past couple days, haven't you?
It's been a 10-day, well, I was going to say sprint, but if there's another word that's
Marathon?
like more. Gabe and I met up in LA, in the city of Los Angeles, for Vid Summit.
For those that don't know, Gabe is our lead developer.
Yeah, Gabe's CTO and does a lot of the magic that makes Switcher do cool stuff. And he had a 12-hour flight, so he was pretty tired when he showed up.
Yeah.
But we had a good show. Vid Summit is hosted by Daryl Eves. He has a really great YouTube channel and a consulting business around doing online and digital and marketing. And this conference brought together a lot of creators and people that are looking at online content. A lot of really great sessions about live video and different strategies for producing content in different forms on different platforms. I was fortunate enough to present on one of the panels about live videos tips and tricks along with Mike Stetzler, who organizes Social Media Marketing World. It's another conference we attended earlier this year that was hosted by Joel Com. Loria Patrice with Live Streaming Pros was on there as well. Will from Stream, it's a streaming provider, and one of the guys from PTZ Optics. And so we talked about best practices for live video across the board, from making an outline before you start, to engaging with your audience, to doing multi-camera productions, and everything in between. So you can go to vidsummit.com. There are virtual tickets available for that, where they recorded the sessions. We also co-sponsored the event with LiveView, and there are interviews with several of the speakers and some behind the scenes that was made with Switcher Studio. Special thanks to Dana Garrison for hosting those interviews and UV for running the production. Gary Vaynerchuk with VaynerMedia was one of the keynote speakers, and a very quotable guy, super high energy, that's had a lot of success with brands and online and digital and using lots of platforms, and actually got to do an interview with him using Switcher Studio. So you can see that on our social, where we've shared that video and on the VidSummit page. But a really great conference, would absolutely recommend it for anyone that's serious about making content and trying to grow their audience and monetize your online videos. Again, maybe not something for everyone, but if you're taking live video really seriously, there's a lot of like-minded people that are doing really cool and creative things. A really cool person I met at the conference, his name is Paul. We've already been shooting back and forth a few emails. He's a magician and does live magic on Facebook, has 1.4 million followers, and really excited to see what he does with Switcher. So Paul will be catching up after the broadcast. Looking forward to talking more and seeing what you're able to pull off using our product. But yeah, you can check out VidSummit's social, and we've shared a lot of content with the behind the scenes and interviews on our social channels as well.
Pretty cool.
Very, very cool. Yeah, before we move on, let me...
We got some questions?
No. I was going to fire up a picture here on my computer. Let me switch over to that. And give it
and you know, when we go to these events, there are some long days, but we also try to meet with as many people as we can. We were fortunate enough to have dinner with Dave Basulto at iOgrapher, and talking about some opportunities coming up down the road where we can work together, especially with schools. So really looking forward to talking more about that as we get a little bit further along. And Gabe and I got to meet up with our friend Ryan Bell, who helped organize the Live Summit in the first kind of Periscope conference a few years ago. And we went to a AR and VR conference hosted by AMD and Dell. Got to try on HoloLens and see some of the new things that people are working on. I think something that was really interesting about that particular event and some of the newer technologies is, as we look at, there's a lot of different terms that are being used in the industry, like augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, live and 360 video, and they're all very different things. The creation process is very different, the viewing experience, the interactivity is very different, but they get lumped together a lot of times because I think they're new media formats, and everyone's still kind of trying to figure them out. But what was most interesting for me is that these new types of media, nobody really knows what to do with yet. Something like 360, it's a camera that shows the real world that's dropped in a particular place, and it's super cool to be able to look around and go places that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. But you're kind of limited to that vantage point in a lot of cases, and it's not super interactive in that you get to choose where you're going, or you're not able to necessarily walk through the space. It makes it challenging from a storytelling perspective to tell the viewer where to look or what to do next, versus something that you would see when you go to the movies or if you're watching online, where a director is making a decision for what to show on screen. And when we look at things like virtual reality, where everything's a pixel, you kind of have free reign. It's almost like being inside of a video game. And then other formats like mixed reality or augmented reality, where there's information shown on top of the real world. A lot of the use cases that we're seeing now in the early stages, especially with what Microsoft is doing, are more enterprise. And it's not necessarily storytelling again or interviews. It's interacting with content, from pulling out a virtual motor and taking it apart, to looking at a human body and looking at the different organs and architecture. And I think there's a lot of really valuable use cases for mixed reality at the enterprise level, but all of these new media formats we're still trying to figure out. And I think there's still a lot of new creative things that will come along that we haven't figured out yet, but don't be afraid of them. It doesn't really change what you're doing with video you're making on your phone or how you're using Switcher. They're totally different experiences. The storytelling is a lot different. And I think there's a place for all of these technologies, but I think that was a really good takeaway from being at this auxiliary event from VidSummit, is that the future might look a lot different, but the way that we make and share video really might not be so different than what we see today.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if any of you guys watching out there have ideas as to how you would use 360 video or VR,
Or how you
AR,
are using it.
or right, if you're already doing it, how are you using it? How are you editing video that's 360 video or VR or AR? Let us know.
Share it in the group.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing we talked about this weekend too is, technology keeps going somewhere, but we're always going to have a cell phone or something to make calls or connect with people. So
There'll always be some form of communication, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a cell phone or not. Like, even once we get all the way up and going with augmented reality, I think you'll always need to have some kind of tactile thing with you. Even if all it is like a piece of cardboard that you're looking at.
Something you can touch.
Right, something you can touch, right?
That's
so,
a piece of green foam.
Right,
So,
exactly. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Right before we move on to the next section here, I wanted to here's a photo that we took this morning of, well, most of the team. We're missing Matt, was around, but Brad, yeah, two guys who help out a ton. But there's Gabe, Nick, Angela, me, Whitney's in there too. Ernesto's over there. So yeah, it was a good couple days, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, a lot of work. A lot of things to do, but it was great. Yeah.
Will never be done.
Yeah.
So let's go on to some of the strategy that we've got Ernesto here with us, and Ernesto does a lot of programming and knows a lot about that networking and how that stuff works. So we figured while we have him here, that's a question we get a lot, and that might be something good to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
gonna crack the Red Bull while you do this.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. So, a lot of times on the user group and just in general, I'll see people say, well, I'm having trouble with like the remote cameras looking a little choppy, or I'm having trouble connecting to some cameras, or it's just not stable. And the number one thing that they say is, well, I have really fast internet. And, that's fine, except for that the internet has nothing to do with the stability of your local area network. So, in fact, Switcher will work without internet. If you just wanted to do recording with multiple cameras, all you need is a router or just a Wi-Fi access point, and then connect all the cameras and the iPad to the same network, and then you can start a multi-camera recording. So it has nothing to do with the internet. So I think one piece of confusion is that people think that the more devices you add, the more, the faster your internet connection needs to be, and that's not the case. You can have one camera, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 9, and really the amount of data that's being sent to your destination, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or Twitch or wherever you decide to send it, it stays the same. So I put together a diagram or that kind of shows what a typical setup might look like
Oh, you
for
made
Switcher.
that?
Yeah.
Hey Nick,
Google
pull up the
Draw.
thing. Yeah, pull up.
Red Bull.
No, pull up on your phone.
We're not sponsored, but
Right.
if you want to.
I was gonna say you can. Yeah, pull it up on your phone.
I
It's on
have
the
it
screen
on
right
here, too.
now.
There you
Awesome. Yeah.
go. Yeah. So in this setup we have 4 cameras and a main switcher, and then we represent Facebook as a cloud. So what's going on here is that we have the 4 cameras transmitting via the router to switcher, and each camera, well, let's start with, in this scenario we're streaming in HD 720p. So when you do that, when you pick the HD option and you're streaming to Facebook, you're using around 2 megabits per second. It might be a little bit higher than that, a little bit lower, but the average is 2 megabit. So what happens is that in order to stream at 2 megabits, we need video feeds from each camera at around that same quality. So each camera is sending about 2 megabits per second worth of data via the router into Switcher. So we have 4 cameras in this setup, each one of them 2 megabits. That means that the combined throughput, the amount of data that's being sent to Switcher, is 8 megabits. We just added all those 4 up. So that means that your router or your access point needs to be able to accept that much data from each camera, and it needs to be able to send at least 8 megabits or more to the main switcher. So sometimes what happens then is if you have a slower router or an older one that doesn't support, high bandwidth scenarios, or it isn't very good at managing traffic, the more cameras you add, the worse the quality might look, the choppier the video might get. And that's because the router is receiving the data, but it's withholding it until it has enough time to send it to the switcher. And because we're a real-time video switching application, we can't wait forever for the video to come. So if the video arrives late, we start throwing away frames. Like, this is too late, can't use it anymore. Then that's where you start seeing some choppiness.
Right.
Cool.
So
There was a post that we put on the blog for switcherstudio.com recently that's about the Google Wi-Fi.
right.
And it's a really good starter router.
Mhm.
It's just over $100 US dollars to get started with one unit, and it's also very modular, and it's easy to expand and add additional units that can work together.
Mhm.
So there's networking questions that come up in the user group a lot. If you're looking to make a purchase, the Google routers perform really well in our testing.
Yeah, that was a pretty nice and affordable router. And then there's levels above that too. So if you need a more serious Wi-Fi setup, there are things out there for you, such as Ubiquiti, and I think we'll put together an article on that as well when you need a more professional Wi-Fi setup.
Yeah, I've got the best budget Wi-Fi router that Nick was just talking about, that article. I've got that here, so I'll go ahead and add that to the comments and pin it so y'all can take a look if you're looking for it. Again, we're not sponsoring anything. We just find gear we like, and
Right.
that's what we show you guys.
Right.
But Google, if you want to sponsor.
But Google, if you want to sponsor us.
Right.
But I think you make a important point, Ernesto. The distinction between what happens on your local network, on your router, and the communication between cameras is completely different than your internet speed and your ability to actually send
Absolutely.
video to YouTube and Facebook.
Right.
So just because you have a great connection or a download speed, if you run a speed test and everything looks good, if you're having problems, it could be related to your local router.
Mhm.
And that could be that it's maybe an older router that's using 2.4 frequency.
Yep.
It could be that there's network congestion and other people that are doing things on the network. It could be distance. It could be that there's not a strong enough connection between the device and the router. And so this post that we put up talks about some of those kind of best practices for Wi-Fi in general, things
Right.
to keep an eye on. If you're shopping for a router and you're looking for something with as many antennas as you can find, it doesn't mean it's going to solve your problems. It's more about proximity than anything, and having a strong connection between devices.
Yep. So yeah, the main takeaway from this diagram and from all of this is that ultimately, when you're streaming to Facebook or whatever your destination may be, you're only sending a single stream out there. You're not all 4 cameras, 8 cameras, or whatever are going to Facebook. So if you're saying I want to stream at 2 megabits per second HD, then that's what we're streaming at. So you don't need more internet than that. I typically recommend about 10 to 20% more than what you need. So if you're streaming at 2, maybe try to get 2.5 around there. But looking at the graph, then what could be the biggest bottleneck here is that connection from the router to the main switcher. We see that we need 8 megabits per second from the router to the switcher to receive all the camera angles, and that gets worse as you keep adding more cameras, right? So having a strong, like a really good access point or router really helps in this situation. The other thing that can help is, we've discussed using Ethernet for Switcher Studio. Just adding an Ethernet adapter to the main switcher and connecting that via Ethernet to the main router, just one Ethernet connection, can really clear this up. Even though, the other cameras are wireless, your connection out to the internet might, might be traversing another router or something like that. But ultimately, if the bottleneck is that main connection that's receiving all the camera angles, then hooking up the main iPad through Ethernet helps a lot. And typically that iPad's going to be stationary anyway. Like, you don't want to be moving around, switching. I mean, you can if you'd like to, but if you have a stationary setup and you can run Ethernet on that main device, you're going to have a better time, especially if you're doing more than like 3 or 4 angles. Yeah.
I think one other thing we could note, so we've talked about the local connection and managing video between cameras. We talked about your upload speed and what you send from your main iPad to YouTube or Facebook. If you send the highest quality that you can, we see this in the user group sometimes too. When you go back to watch that video, it might show a lower resolution than what you selected or are sending from Switcher, and that's kind of the third piece of this, is that once the video makes it to the content delivery network or the platform, that platform is going to choose what to show your viewers based on the device that they're watching or the connection that they have, and it's going to try to optimize it for smooth playback so that it's not buffering or loading or getting stuck. And in some cases that might mean lowering the quality. So if you're sending HD video from Switcher to Facebook, if you have enough upload speed, as long as your viewers have a connection that can support that's what they'll see. But all of those platforms handle that a little bit differently, and they're pushing to make for the best viewing experience and make sure that there's a moving picture.
Right. The most important thing for a video delivery network or content delivery network is to make sure that your viewers have a smooth experience, even if it looks pixelated, right? If they have to drop the quality so that you can actually get all of the video. I think viewers are more lenient on a little bit of quality loss as long as the audio is there and as long as I'm getting good video, right, that I can actually watch without stutters and without buffering and all those annoying things. So, and I think a lot of you have experienced that even when watching something like Netflix. You might sometimes your connection gets a little slow and your video looks like it was printed on a postage stamp.
You get the potato quality.
Right, potato quality, but that's what they try to do, is that they don't want to interrupt your viewing experience, so they'll lower the quality so you don't get paused, you don't get buffering.
And I guess we've talked about this before. One of the special things about Switcher is a function called Director Mode. Ernesto, you want to talk a little bit about how you could use Director Mode in a situation where you might not have a great connection?
Sure. So let's say you're at a venue, you don't have your own wireless router. You don't really have control over your wireless network. This will happen. Maybe you'll get some work and you need to go somewhere and you don't have a complete control of the setup. You can still have a really high quality, pristine, program feed recording of your event using Director Mode, and this can happen even on the worst wireless networks. And the way that works is that when you enable Director Mode, it triggers a recording on each remote device, on each camera, and then you still see the preview, and you can still try to stream live, but if you're in a really bad networking situation, you're going to get that choppy video. But as long as you can see the videos and make your cuts, you can select camera 1, camera 2, camera 3. What'll happen is that those recordings, after you're done with your session, after you hit stop recording, they'll start downloading to the main iPad, and then the main iPad will replay all the actions that you did while you were live. So if I cut to camera 3 and then to 1, and then back to 3 and then to 2, it remembers everything that you did. And then it grabs the original ISO recordings, means the original recordings from the devices, and reapplies those. And with Director Mode, you can hit 1080p at up to 50 megabits per second, which is beyond what Blu-rays usually offer at
fixed frame rate for your
final
composition.
Right, and you can do fixed frame rate for your final comps if you want to do a perfect 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second or what NTSC like 23.97 or something. You can do that.
So we're seeing a few comments come through. I know Dan, this is normally your shtick.
I was. Hey, if you go for it, I was gonna ask him to you anyway. So,
One of them that popped up here is if you're running using the cables or adapters to do Ethernet from your main device to your router, how would you manage audio?
Okay.
How do you get audio into your main device?
Right. So when you're doing that takes up your Lightning port on the bottom of your iPad. So I think really what you're left with is the 3.5 millimeter audio port, right? Hopefully, as long as they don't take that away on the iPad, right? No, yeah. So you would have to use like an iRig. What would you call it? Is it the iRig Pre?
Yeah,
iRig Pre.
The iRig Pre, to bring in the audio through the audio jack on the iPad, and then use the Lightning port to do the Ethernet. Now, having said that, there's been some users in our group that have posted like USB, what do you call them, like a USB hub that can plug into the Lightning connector. We haven't personally tried these yet. We're looking for confirmation from some of our users. If it works, we're going to probably order a few just to see if it's possible. Because if it does work, that means you would be able to plug in a USB hub into your iPad and then plug in an Ethernet adapter, a stereo, like a Behringer 202, right? Like an audio mixer. You could do more. Now, with these USB hubs, typically they need power separately from, all the other devices. So you'll need to plug in power into the hub and then plug in power to maybe the Ethernet adapter and all this.
Yep.
But it seems like it might be possible. So we'll look into that for you guys and see. That would be a cool solution if we could get both Ethernet and, like audio, and possibly even HDMI. Now, one thing that you have to realize is that just like Wi-Fi, just like Ethernet, just like any other mode of communications, that Lightning port only has so much bandwidth. It only has so much throughput. It's a lot of throughput, but just because you can plug in a million things doesn't mean that it's going to work. There may not be enough throughput to do audio, video, network, so it's going to be one of those things where you just need to try it out and make sure that it works for you before you actually go to a venue and attempt it.
Well, and if you have a headphone jack available, the iRig Pre is really the ideal workflow to be able to do both. It really simplifies the setup.
The quick answer for the iRigs, the iRig Pre, if you're not worried about stereo audio and you're worried about price, get it. It's only $30 or $40, I think, and they work great. That's what we're using right now. The only real benefit that the iRig Pro, which plugs into the charge cable, has over the Pre is stereo audio. That's it. So,
and for an online stream, unless you're doing something in surround sound or a music performance, mono is okay in a lot of cases, especially for talk show formats or things where you might be doing an interview. It's what most people are used to hearing for online video anyways.
Right. We had a question about whether all the devices we're using right now are hardwired. And I think the answer is none of them are
No,
hardwired.
we have a pretty robust setup here. So,
the cables you see are used for charging the devices.
Right.
We're supplying power.
Right.
They're all using the wireless network.
Right. And see, in a situation like this, there's only a few people here.
It's a controlled environment.
Right, it's a controlled environment. The access point is like right here next to me. Like, there's not going to be any problems with the Wi-Fi in this situation. If you try to take this access point to a concert with 3,000 people, they all bring their own cell phones. That creates a lot of interference. There's bodies, right? 2.4 gigahertz especially can't travel through water, and guess what? People are made out of water, basically. So, and that's why we recommend 5 gigahertz, even though 5 gigahertz has its own problems. It can't go through more solid objects like walls, right? Yeah. So you have to pick the right frequency, the right setup for what you're trying to do. But in situations like that, if it's absolutely paramount that you have a perfect connection, invest in some Ethernet adapters and some Ethernet cables.
And again, the Google Wi-Fi is the easy kind of starting point for setups like this.
Yeah.
And we'll be putting out some videos and tutorials on different configurations where you can use it for an expanded network. One of the other questions here, are there any public access or local cable TV stations using Switcher Studio? One that we know well is TV Santa Barbara. It's tvsb.tv, and they use Switcher regularly in their community to cover events. And they have a couple of kits that they actually send out where people can come to the station, get trained, and go out and do coverage. And they're streaming on Facebook. They're also using director mode to record that and play back over their local cable network. Another one is West Royce in Glasgow, and they're using Switcher to do a lot of online video for their radio station, but they also have an agreement with the local cable network, and their radio station is producing most of the local video programming that you see in that particular community. Yeah. So both of those organizations are in the user group. If you were to post a question, I'm sure they'd be happy to reach out. Matt Schuster, that was leading TV Santa Barbara, has moved to Kalamazoo, I think, and he's with another public TV station there now. But he's been a great supporter of Switcher, and they've used it really well in their community.
And there's a lot of radio stations and TV stations that are also using Switcher to kind of enhance their online presence, right? Not just to broadcast content on their TV station, but to also broadcast content onto their Facebook page. Mm-hmm. And then with director mode, they can grab really high quality footage from that Facebook broadcast and then possibly use it like on the night news or whatever, you know.
One of the other questions we just saw, this is a little bit further up, how is Switcher different from a software application like XSplit? Mm-hmm. I'll kind of kick it off, but if you all want to jump in.
Sure.
I feel like Angela probably has...
Switcher is completely mobile. All you need is an iPhone or an iPad. A lot of these other services that have been around for a while, like XSplit or Wirecast, or I guess vMix is a little bit newer, but they require a desktop. Even OBS is a free software program, requires a computer with a lot of onboard resources, and if you're bringing in other cameras, it's capture cards and cables, and it can add up really quickly. There's a pretty significant upfront investment to be able to do multi-camera video with some of the other software that's been around for a while, and Switcher's completely mobile and made specifically for iOS. Mm-hmm. So anything you want to add there?
Angela, have you used XSplit at all?
I've not used XSplit. I usually do OBS, but just as Nick was saying, it's a free software. XSplit is paid, so that's
OBS
already
is free.
Yeah, that's already another investment for XSplit. But for my setup with that, I've got $200 capture card. I had to go out and get a webcam. I had to get all this other equipment to get it set up, and then there's the matter of still going in and manually making all these titles and everything. So it's a lot of upfront time invested and a lot of upfront money invested. Whereas for my mobile streaming that I do with Switcher Studio, I've had an iPhone since 2009, so I didn't have to purchase anything else right away. You download the app, you can sync it to any other iOS device. You start with the trial, and even once the trial's ended, $29 is nothing compared to $200 capture cards and cameras and everything else. And I can't take my OBS setup out on the road. If I'm not at home, it's just not going to happen. Whereas I can go anywhere I want and use Switcher Studio without being tied down with all those cables. So for me, I use both for different things, but Switcher, a lot cheaper up front, a lot quicker to get started with it. I just upload a couple of images and I was ready to go. And I can be at a conference in LA and I can still go live, whereas my setup at home is stuck in Kentucky.
Yep. We didn't pay her. I mean, we pay her, but we didn't pay her to say that.
A lot of disclosures here today.
So many sponsorships today.
Yeah, I saw Kevin in the comments too mention the Sony headphones placed in here too. So no, Sony doesn't pay us either. I just like these headphones.
No sponsors. We've tried out a lot of different products, and to help other people be successful, we like to share the ones that work well for us. So It's a lot of fun. If you're looking at Switcher Studio, you haven't tried it yet, you can create an account on our website, switcherstudio.com. Full access for the first 14 days, no credit card required. And if you decide to stick with it, it's $29 a month or $300 a year. If you need help, contact support at switcherstudio.com. Also check out our user group, Switcher Studio Enthusiasts. There's information from your online Switcher account on how to get into that group. And it's a really great resource to talk to the community and other creators, share ideas, share your content, and start making better live video.
Okay.
Speaking of all that, our last section we like to do here is our Made with Switcher, and one of the comments in there was from Ryan, who actually is our hashtag Made with Switcher user, and I'll let Angela go ahead and talk about that.
Sure. So before we get into the video, you know, we go over this every week, but we do get a lot of new people joining every week, so you guys are listening, which is good. We have a user group called Switcher Studio Enthusiasts. We have a lot of people share tips and tricks and everything else in the group, but they'll also share some of their own personal video. So we recommend you guys join the group, and if you share your video like Ryan did, we will show one video a week on our stream. So this is an example of a wine tasting. It was posted in the group by Ryan Tae Hong Song. I'm very sorry if I mispronounced that. And it was also shot with his co-host Xia Hui Hong. And this video, we really loved it. They're using, you know, multi-view effects. They're using logos. They're using all kinds of transitions and lower thirds. So it was a great example of what can be done with Switcher Studio. They had some screen sharing going on, and above that, it was just a fun video. So, you know, it's definitely one that caught our eye when it was posted. We reached out to Ryan, and, you know, he was happy to give us the permissions to show it with you guys. And he announced they're doing another video like this on Friday. So if you guys like Ryan's work, there's more to come.
Very cool. And while we're living in user group land, we saw Joyce was in the group doing a broadcast last night, and she volunteered to do a broadcast for a community event. Was asking some questions in the group and got some good feedback, and had a really smart idea and a really kind of sophisticated thing to do within her broadcast that also ended up causing a few problems. So I just wanted to give a heads up on this. In Switcher, when you start your broadcast, we even do this for our own. We'll a lot of times start a countdown or show a graphic or show a logo before we begin for a few seconds. And at the top of the screen is a mute icon so that you can mute the sound if you don't have any background audio or you don't want conversations to be overheard while you're setting up or waiting for the stream to actually go live. And it's a great way to control your audio directly within the Switcher interface. Also really helpful if you're in a situation where you can't control what's happening in the room and maybe a copyrighted song comes over the air or something's being said that doesn't need to be broadcast. It's kind of a quick way to stop the sound.
And to be clear, it mutes the sound from your audio input, whether it's your microphone or an iRig or whatever, but it doesn't mute the sound from a video that you're playing back.
Right.
So you can play a video, like a countdown with some music or something, and then mute your microphone or mute your audio. And that way you guys can talk with it, amongst yourselves and still play something for your audience.
Yeah, so it's a good way to mute the incoming sound, but that's an important distinction. If you have a video, you play it, that's what your viewer is going to hear. And so for this particular production, Joyce had the audio muted before she started, and once the guest came on camera, it wasn't until much later in the production that she noticed she forgot to turn it back on. So, thank you for asking questions, and thank you to those that jumped in the group. Joyce, looking forward to the next one, and the effort that you put into this, and it sounds like it was a really great production. Glad that your community was supportive. I know if this had been a paid gig, that would have been something that's kind of scary. But just wanted to bring that up because it's a really smart tactic, and it's something that we use and we see a lot of users use. But be thinking about your workflow and the things that you want to show on screen, the order that you want to do certain things, maybe making an outline or a checklist before you start your broadcast. And that'll help you as you start doing more content. And the idea of switching and multiple cameras, it's really exciting and it's a lot of fun to watch, but it can also be a little overwhelming, especially if you're doing it for the first time or just getting started or maybe a little rusty. So just wanted to say a big thank you to Joyce for asking questions and being involved and doing a great broadcast, but also just a heads up to everyone else out there. If you're doing a broadcast, the mute function is great. Be sure to bring it back on if there's something that needs to be said on camera.
Yeah, full disclosure, I've 100% done that before on this stream. I know Angela, it was just the two of us, and we come out of a video and I just start talking away and she just leans over and goes, we're still muted. So yeah, it happens to the best of us.
Right,
Yeah, kind of what I always try to remember, because I've done it too, especially, if you're one person controlling it, you're trying to think, what am I going to say next, and trying to do all the stuff at the same time. But I just kind of remember, if I don't see my audio meter moving, something's not right. And instead of my first few streams thinking, I wonder if that should be moving, just kind of remembering it should be going. And that's one thing. After I made mistakes with it, now I know to check and be like, okay, and unmute. But definitely when you get started, it's something that can happen. Try to make some kind of a note, maybe have another person in the room just to even motion, make sure it's unmuted, and that will help to alleviate that issue.
One of the other comments that came through on the video earlier in this segment, we talked about screen sharing for Mac and Windows. The Windows screen sharing for Switcher is a very new feature. It's still in beta. It's still something that we're developing and improving. The system requirements that we have listed on the website are a pretty high bar. That is something that we will improve as we continue to develop this feature to make it take advantage of your hardware, be more lightweight, work on more devices. By no means does that mean you can't try it on the machine that you have, but we do recommend quad-core i7 Windows 10 for Windows screen sharing today. And I just want you to know that it is something that we're still working on, but the beta version does work quite well. And
yeah, we wanted to get something out to you guys sooner rather than later. We could have held it back and made it perfect, but sometimes I think a lot of you will get a lot of great use out of it as it is now without it being optimized. So but know that we're still working on it.
Yeah, it will get better and work on more and more devices.
Mm-hmm.
So it is an early release. It is a beta. It does come with some risks, but I think the benefit that comes along with being able to use your computer screen is a big win for a lot of people, and we've been waiting on that for a long time, and we're really happy to get that out.
I think that's a wrap.
All right, let's do it. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter. If you have a question, email support@switcherstudio.com. If you are looking at Switcher or considering it and have not created a trial, be sure to do that through the website. Again, the first 14 days are on us, full access to everything. And, check us out online, switcherstudio.com.
Like and share.
We'll be here next week. Take care.
See ya.
Bye, everyone.